in the video, it was able to capture a lot of the essence of what we've been able to establish over the last 10 years in building integrated communities. What you saw was a group of people that only a small portion were part of the faith community. It was very much a collection of people from other churches, from the marginalized within our community, from the university campuses. And what it all amounts to is something called that we've come to call integrated community, and it stands in contrast to the siloed way that we live our lives now. And this first slide is a graphic that we start off most presentations with, because often people will come to us having experienced things like the Bridgeport Cafe or the chair yoga or the jump math tutoring program, and it just feels different. And nobody can really articulate why. One of the biggest complaints we have for the Bridgeport Cafe, which is our afternoon drop-in, is that people don't know who's volunteering and who's not. And it's because we all come together as equals. And it's in some ways very disarming for people when they first come. But once they get used to that, it's an incredibly inspiring place to hear stories and connect with other people. So why did we create, what is Waterloo Wayside? So Waterloo Wayside is a group of people that work within the Emmanuel United Church structure that are focused on creating and supported integrated community in a secular setting. And so the group itself consists of people from Emmanuel, but from other churches as well as the community in general. The integration component of the programs we offer is a big criteria in how we evaluate the success of programs. So we certainly don't want to create any programs that are competing with the for-profit sector or any social programs that other organizations are running. We're really focused on programs that break down the silos and get different people together. And we serve youth, seniors, and the isolated within our community using that strategy. So why did we create Wayside? In 2014, we had a near-death experience, and we realized that as a church, we really didn't have openings for the community to come in and join us. And so what we did was very intentionally create Wayside as a secular brand that reflected the community values and allowed them to come in. We identified that, churches have their own language and their own culture. And by offering language and programs that are appealing to youth and non-religious and all faiths, we're able to really have a lot more people under our tent and share a lot of the same core values. In that video, you saw Bhamini, who's Hindu from Sri Lanka. You obviously heard Ziggy, who grew up in the Roman Catholic faith. The irony of Ziggy is that he actually doesn't go to any of the services. He's not part of the faith community, but there's more religious and faith-based insight and ideas from him than the majority of the people that worship on Sunday. Wayside also created a framework. We just didn't want to create a single program and say, okay, this is what we're going to hang our hat on. We wanted Wayside to represent a framework for building a broader community support. And then, of course, we wanted to make this whole thing sustainable. You don't have to have a master's in demographics to realize that the Sunday worship model for churches is not going to last much longer. Wayside is based on 4 key principles. The first is missional church. We did a lot of reading around missional churches versus attractional. So for people that haven't experienced or read much about missional church, the idea behind it is that as Christians, it's incumbent on us to join God working in the world. And that stands in contrast to something called the attractional model, where for the last 500 years, we walked around with the assumption that God was with us and God was in our building, and it was incumbent on us to bring people into our building. And so this is flipping it all on its head. And there are really interesting outcomes of missional church. By joining God working in the world, church no longer becomes a Sunday morning exercise. God is working in the world 24/7. And what we found is by embracing missional church, we've become a 7-day-a-week church. Another core principle that drives our work is something called asset-based community development. It is a school of thought that was developed about 20 years ago out of Northwestern University. And it's based on the principle that community has everything that it needs to heal itself. Over the last 100 years, we've been convinced that we no longer have the qualifications or skills to heal our own communities. And the situation we found ourselves in now is that unless we can raise a whole lot of money to bring professionals in to fix us, it's a non-starter. What asset-based community development does is allows us to say, look, we have everything we need. We just have to be smart and think outside the box in terms of how things work. The strongest example of asset-based community development that I can think of is our Jump Math tutoring program. We offer math tutoring to kids 11 to 13 years old, and we do it by bringing in university-age students from the universities, and they establish incredible mentoring relationships where the 11 to 13-year-olds learn about life paths that they never even thought possible. And for 1 hour a week, those university students are heroes in the eyes of somebody. And right now, our campuses are experiencing mental health crisis with suicides. There's over a 6-month waiting list for mental health professionals on campus. And just by offering this math tutoring program, we're playing a very important role. The third founding principle is something called third space. It's a sociology concept based on, again, something that came up about 20 years ago, where your first space is where you live, your second space is where you work, and your third space is where you go to interact with people. And so third spaces have some really interesting properties. It's not an invention, it's more of a discovery. They exist everywhere in the world, in every society. But once you understand that third spaces need to be open to everyone being equal, and to have the mix of newcomers and regulars, and provide a sharing and welcoming space, you can do some really magical things. And the fourth thing that we're working on now is something that we're referring to developing paths for interdependence. What we found is when people show up at our doorstep in crisis, it's because they've lost connection to the community. And there's a 3-step process to restore that. One is relieving the crisis. The second is providing development. And the third is reintegrating with providing integration. And so what we found is that if you try to provide relief to people that aren't in crisis, so if somebody's in need of development or integration and you're providing relief, what you're actually doing is you're enabling. And that's been a really powerful model in seeing how our programs impact the community and how we can best serve people. These are just some high-level stats that we've just assembled for last year. We have over 100 volunteers, and collectively we put in over 200 hours per week. Calculated at a living wage, that amounts to $167,000 of programming, $167,000 of programming that we deliver to the area every year. Then the other numbers I'll let you take a look at, but it certainly speaks to the impact that we can have in the community with a budget of between $20,000 and $30,000 depending on the year. So this is incredibly impactful. I think I've probably exceeded my 10 minutes, but I thought it was important that I share a lot of the underlying principles that drove what you saw in the presentation, in the